What happens when one of Hollywood's most legendary tough guys comes face to face with a morning show host who believes he can push anyone into a corner? Well, you're about to find out, because Clint Eastwood allegedly delivered one of the most brutal verbal takedowns ever imagined for live television, and it supposedly happened on Good Morning America. The confrontation was portrayed as so intense that producers were left scrambling to figure out how to deal with the fallout. Make sure you subscribe and leave a comment, because this story is the kind of television drama that would leave anyone speechless. The morning began like any other day at the Good Morning America studio in Times Square. Clint Eastwood had supposedly agreed to appear on the program to promote his latest directorial project, a decision that surprised many people considering that the 94-year-old icon rarely makes appearances on morning television. The studio was buzzing with anticipation as crew members prepared for what everyone assumed would be a straightforward conversation with one of the most enduring legends in cinematic history. Michael Strahan arrived that morning carrying his familiar confidence. Coming off what he viewed as another successful week behind the hosting desk, he was riding high on strong ratings and appeared more self-assured than ever. While reviewing his notes backstage, Strahan reportedly made it clear to his producers that he wanted the upcoming interview to stand out. "I want to dig deep with this guy," Strahan allegedly told his team while straightening his tie. "Everyone always treats these old Hollywood types with kid gloves. I'm gonna ask the real questions people want answered." His producer, Sarah, reportedly looked concerned. "Michael, remember, this is Clint Eastwood we're talking about. He isn't exactly known for being chatty or patient with aggressive questioning." Strahan supposedly dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "Please, Sarah, I've interviewed presidents, athletes, and A-list celebrities. I can handle one old cowboy actor. Besides, our audience loves it when I bring some edge to these interviews." Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood sat quietly inside his dressing room, going over the talking points prepared by his publicist. At his age, he had encountered virtually every kind of interviewer imaginable, from thoughtful journalists who respected his work to ambitious hosts desperate to make a name for themselves. He had learned to recognize the tone of an interview within the first few minutes. His longtime assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Eastwood, they're ready for you in 5 minutes." "Thank you," Clint replied in his familiar gravelly voice. He stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, and headed toward the studio with the same deliberate pace that had defined his screen presence for generations. As the cameras went live, Robin Roberts delivered the introduction from the anchor desk. "Coming up next, we have a very special guest joining Michael this morning. The legendary Clint Eastwood is here to discuss his new film and an extraordinary career spanning more than 6 decades in Hollywood." The camera then cut to Michael Strahan, who flashed his trademark smile while sitting across from the legendary director. "Good morning, everyone. I'm here with the one and only Clint Eastwood." "Clint, thanks for joining us this morning." Eastwood gave a slight nod. "Good morning, Michael." Before discussing the new project, Strahan immediately shifted toward a more provocative subject. "No, before we talk about your new project, I have to ask about something that's been on everyone's mind lately." He leaned forward with what he appeared to consider journalistic intensity. "There's been a lot of discussion about whether older directors like yourself are still relevant in today's Hollywood. How do you respond to critics who say your time has passed?" The question lingered in the studio like a direct challenge. Eastwood's expression remained unchanged, but those familiar with his personality would have noticed a subtle adjustment in his posture. The audience, which moments earlier had been filled with excitement, suddenly became quiet. "Critics? Huh," Eastwood replied slowly, his voice carrying the familiar edge that had defined so many of his most memorable characters. "Well, Michael, I've been hearing from critics for more than 60 years. Most of them are sitting in offices somewhere, and many have never made a film in their lives." Strahan, apparently undeterred, pushed ahead. "But surely you have to admit that the industry has changed dramatically. Young audiences want different stories and different perspectives. Don't you think it might be time for your generation to step aside and let fresh voices take over?" The camera captured Eastwood's reaction, his gaze fixed directly on Strahan with the same intensity that once made his Western characters so intimidating. When he finally responded, his voice was calm but carried unmistakable authority. "Step aside," Eastwood repeated, allowing the words to hang in the air. "Son, I was making movies when you were still learning how to tie your shoes. I've directed and produced films that won Academy Awards, influenced the industry, and inspired generations of filmmakers. What exactly have you accomplished in your life that gives you the authority to tell me when I should step aside?" The response landed hard, but Strahan's pride reportedly prevented him from retreating. Instead of recognizing that the exchange was heading into dangerous territory, he doubled down. "Well, I've built a successful career in television. I was a professional athlete, and I connect with audiences across America every single day." Strahan replied, his voice rising slightly. "I think that gives me the right to ask difficult questions that viewers want answered." Eastwood's response came quickly. "A career in television," he said, emphasizing each word. "You mean reading from a teleprompter and asking celebrities about their personal lives? And as for being a professional athlete, that ended years ago, didn't it? You're sitting here trying to build your reputation by tearing down mine. Frankly, son, that's the mark of someone who doesn't have much of a reputation to begin with." The studio supposedly fell completely silent. Even the camera operators appeared to freeze as they captured what was becoming an increasingly uncomfortable exchange. Strahan's face reportedly flushed as he realized that his attempt to create a memorable interview was turning against him. The tension was palpable. But instead of backing away, Strahan allegedly tried to regain control. "Look, Clint, I'm just doing my job here," he said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "The audience wants to know these things. I'm not trying to attack you personally, but let's be honest about the reality of Hollywood today." Eastwood narrowed his eyes. "Your job," he repeated, his voice dropping lower. "Your job is supposed to be interviewing me about my new film. Instead, you're sitting there like some wannabe Mike Wallace, trying to manufacture controversy where none exists." The reference to the legendary hard-hitting journalist appeared to unsettle Strahan. Yet rather than taking the warning, he escalated again. "I think I'm being perfectly reasonable," Strahan protested, becoming increasingly defensive. "I'm asking the questions that need to be asked. Hollywood has a diversity problem, an age problem, and frankly, a relevance problem when it comes to older white directors." The instant those words supposedly left his mouth, the atmosphere in the studio seemed to change. Eastwood leaned back in his chair. For several seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then he spoke. "There it is," Eastwood said slowly, nodding as though everything had suddenly become clear. "You want to make this about race and age because you don't have the intelligence or preparation to have an actual conversation about filmmaking. You're sitting there trying to bait me into saying something controversial so you can have your little viral moment." Strahan's composure began to deteriorate. His voice became sharper. "That's not what I'm doing at all. I'm addressing real issues in the industry. These are legitimate concerns that people have. Legitimate concerns." Eastwood's voice rose slightly, marking one of the first moments when he appeared genuinely emotional. "Son, I've been making films since before you were born. I've worked with actors from every race, gender, and background. I've told stories that matter, stories that have survived the test of time. What stories have you told, Michael? What have you contributed to the world besides reading other people's words from a screen?" The personal nature of the challenge reportedly rattled Strahan. Under the bright studio lights, he appeared increasingly uncomfortable as the carefully controlled interview turned into a verbal battle. "I've contributed plenty," Strahan fired back, his professional composure finally cracking. "I've entertained millions of people, I've inspired young athletes, and I've built multiple successful careers. I don't need to justify myself to you or anyone else." Eastwood leaned forward slightly. "Multiple careers, huh? Let me tell you something about careers, kid. A real career is built on excellence, consistency, and respect from your peers. It isn't built by jumping from one thing to another and hoping something sticks. Football ended for you because you got older and slower. Now you're in television, and from what I can see, you're not particularly good at that either." The assessment left Strahan speechless for several seconds. The cameras continued capturing every expression as he struggled to formulate a response. The studio audience remained silent, watching what had become a demonstration of how quickly confidence could collapse when someone lost control of an interview. "That's completely unfair," Strahan finally managed, his voice tight with anger. "You don't know anything about my work or my accomplishments." "I know enough," Eastwood replied calmly. "I know you invited me here supposedly to discuss my film, and instead you've spent this entire interview trying to tear me down so you can build yourself up. That tells me everything I need to know about your character and your professionalism." Backstage, producers were supposedly scrambling to determine how to salvage the situation. Sarah reportedly spoke rapidly into her headset while network executives watched the exchange unfold. Meanwhile, the social media team was already dealing with messages from viewers reacting to what they were seeing. Strahan, realizing he was losing control, made one final attempt to regain the upper hand. "You know what, Clint? Maybe the problem isn't just about age or relevance. Maybe it's about attitude. You come in here with this arrogant, superior attitude, like you're above answering real questions." The accusation hung in the air. Eastwood's expression barely changed, yet his presence seemed to dominate the entire studio. When he answered, his voice was quiet enough that the microphones appeared to strain to capture it, but every word carried enormous weight. "Arrogant," Eastwood repeated, slowly shaking his head. Son, arrogance is sitting across from a guest and trying to humiliate them for your own entertainment. Arrogance is believing that being a television host gives you the right to judge someone's entire life's work. Arrogance is what you've been displaying for the last 10 minutes. He paused. But what's really pathetic is that you're not even good at being arrogant. You're like a child playing dress up, trying to act tough when you don't have the intelligence, experience, or class to pull it off. Strahan's face reportedly shifted through anger, embarrassment, and finally something close to panic. He appeared to realize that he had completely lost control of the conversation. His attempt to create a memorable television moment had turned into a spectacular failure, and there was no obvious way to recover. The situation continued deteriorating as Strahan desperately searched for a way to restore his dignity. His media training may have prepared him for difficult interviews, but nothing could have prepared him for a confrontation of this nature. With sweat reportedly visible on his forehead and his voice beginning to crack, he made another attempt to reverse the situation. "Look, I think we're getting off track here," Strahan said, attempting to bring his trademark smile back. "Maybe we should just agree to disagree and talk about your new movie." Eastwood's response was immediate. "Oh, Michael, you don't get to do that. You started this little game, and now you want to quit because you're losing. That's not how it works in the real world." The contempt in his voice was unmistakable. "You see, this is exactly what's wrong with people like you. You think you can say whatever you want, attack whoever you want, and then simply smile and move on when things don't go your way. But actions have consequences, son, and words have meaning." Strahan's desperation became increasingly obvious. "I was just doing my job, asking tough questions. That's what journalists do, journalists." Eastwood responded with a cold, humorless laugh. "Is that what you think you are? Let me explain something about journalism, kid. Real journalists do research, they prepare thoughtful questions. They show respect for their subjects while still pursuing the truth. What you did today was amateur, our character assassination disguised as an interview." The studio crew reportedly watched with a mixture of fascination and disbelief as one of entertainment's most respected figures appeared to completely dismantle the host. Camera operators continued capturing every moment, seemingly aware that they were witnessing an extraordinary television exchange. "You came in here with an agenda," Eastwood continued, his voice gaining strength with every sentence. "You wanted to make yourself look important by trying to make me look irrelevant. But here's what you failed to understand, Michael. Relevance isn't determined by age or by the opinion of some television host who peaked playing a game with a ball." Strahan's face was now flushed with embarrassment and anger. "That's not fair. I've worked hard to build my career in television." "Hard work," Eastwood replied, raising his eyebrows. "Rating cue cards and asking celebrities about their dating lives is hard work, son. Hard work is spending 18 hours a day on a film set trying to tell a story that matters. Hard work is mastering your craft over decades, not months. Hard work is earning the respect of your peers through excellence, not relying on gimmicks and controversy." The veteran director leaned back, appearing completely comfortable despite the growing chaos around him. "You want to know what real journalism looks like? It's asking about the creative process. It's understanding the craft. It's showing genuine curiosity about how someone has sustained excellence for 6 decades. Instead, you came in here with some half-baked agenda about age and relevance because that's the only level you're capable of operating on." Strahan was now completely out of his depth, struggling to construct a coherent response. "I think you're being unfair to my preparation and my intentions." "Your intentions?" Eastwood's voice dropped into that familiar dangerous whisper once again. "Your intentions were obvious from the first question. You wanted to create a moment, generate headlines, maybe go viral on social media. You thought you could use me as a stepping stone to raise your own profile. The problem is, you picked the wrong target." The silence that followed was reportedly deafening. Even the audience seemed afraid to breathe as the legendary actor and director continued dismantling the argument in front of him. But Eastwood was not finished. "Let me give you some free advice, Michael, since it's clear nobody else has had the courage to tell you the truth. Respect is earned, not demanded. Class can't be taught, but it can be learned if you're humble enough to listen. And most importantly, if you're going to come at someone, you better make sure you're equipped for the fight." Strahan made one final attempt to regain control. "I think our viewers would appreciate it if we could just move forward professionally." The Eastwood answered with the same quiet intensity that had defined his legendary screen persona. "Professionally? There's nothing professional about what you did here today. You ambushed a guest, showed complete disrespect towards someone who has been in this business longer than you've been alive, and then tried to hide behind your job description when it backfired." He slowly stood from his chair, and somehow his presence seemed even larger than before. Here's what's going to happen now. I'm going to walk out of here with my dignity intact and my reputation unharmed. You, on the other hand, are going to have to explain to your bosses, your viewers, and yourself why you thought it was a good idea to pick a fight you couldn't win. The cameras reportedly captured every moment as Eastwood calmly removed his microphone. Good luck with your career, Michael. Based on what I've seen today, you're going to need it. With that final line, Clint Eastwood supposedly walked away from the set, leaving behind a stunned audience, a panicked production crew, and a television host who had seemingly run out of words. Strahan remained frozen in his chair as the cameras continued rolling, capturing what would supposedly become one of the most talked about moments in television history. The silence lasted what felt like an eternity before the program finally cut to commercial, but the damage had already been done. In less than 15 minutes, the confident host had allegedly transformed from the person controlling the interview into the central figure of a viral cautionary tale, while Clint Eastwood had once again demonstrated the image of authority that had defined his career for generations. The confrontation, as portrayed in this story, serves as a reminder that a television platform does not automatically grant someone authority over another person's life or career. Respect has to be earned, and credibility is built through years of consistent work, discipline, preparation, and excellence. Some people spend decades earning the right to speak with authority, while others risk their credibility by chasing a single dramatic moment. The larger lesson is simple. If you step into an interview determined to provoke your guest, you should be prepared for the possibility that the conversation may not unfold according to your plan, and when the person sitting across from you has decades of experience, an established legacy, and nothing left to prove, trying to manufacture controversy can quickly become a dangerous strategy.